I remember my dad telling me that some things you just can't take back. And it was one of those moments where he was giving me life advice. And he probably knew that I didn't necessarily want to hear it because I was still a teenager. And he recognized the lifestyle that I was living was going to lead to, in all likelihood, prison or death. And he wasn't wrong. And I remember him saying, if I can give you a good piece of advice, son, it would be think before you take another man's life. He said, because that's what I mean when I say some things you just can't take back. He said, if you take another man's life, you can't take it back. And you're going to have to suffer the consequences. And he said, I love you enough, to where I want to give you a warning. And my dad grew up, in a tough time. And he was a tough young man. He used to get in a lot of fist fights. But he grew up in a time where they fist fought. That's literally, they knew how to fight. My dad got arrested and he went to the parish jail. And his dad, my grandfather, had to bail him out. My dad was arrested under a sting operation for selling marijuana. Back in the 1970s, when my dad got caught selling this marijuana, it was probably roughly right before I was born or right after I was born. And my mom had to go get him out of jail. I think she knew my dad at the time. And when he got out of jail, he got a conviction. And he was probably 17, 18 years old when he got that conviction. It was the only conviction my father ever got as a felony. The only one for selling marijuana. Him and another one of my uncles, they were involved in it together. They both got arrested together. I don't know whatever happened to my uncle's charges, but my dad did take a plea bargain. And he dealt with that conviction up until the end of his life. And my dad lived a non-felonious life from the time that they arrested him in the 70s until my dad passed away in the 2020s. And he still had to deal with that felony, man. He wanted to have his rights to keep and bear arms, and it was a marijuana charge. They should have given him his full rights to keep and bear arms because he was a good man. All his friends, anybody would have vouched for him. He had police officer friends in his whole area that knew him. And my dad still had guns. He still had weapons. They didn't have no problem with it. He just didn't do nothing stupid. But I'll never forget that, sitting here thinking, my dad told me, and gave me some good advice. He said, some things you can't change, so think about what you do. And I was blessed because I was slinging bullets around everywhere, and I was doing some really, really, really bad and stupid stuff. And I survived. I made it through. And here I am today, to talk about it. And I'm glad that I'm not doing a life sentence because it could have happened to me. And many a times those bullets that were coming at me, they could have struck me and I could have died, but I didn't. I'm here. I'm alive. And just looking back at life, man, you're grateful. You're like, I'm one of the ones who are still here. And if you watch my channel, in all likelihood, I'm guessing, I have a large portion of people who watch my channel. They're in their 40s, 50s. And I know I got some people in my 30s and some in the 20s. But I know there's also a lot who's in their 40s and 50s. And if we reach the point to where we're in our 40s and we're in our 50s, the chances are that in all reality, we have more time behind us than ahead of us. So if we have more time behind of us than ahead of us, then we don't have a whole lot of time to mess around. We got to get busy with things that matter. Somebody's watching this and maybe you spent 20, 30 years in jail. Maybe you just got out from, a 5-year sentence, or maybe you just got out from a couple of months of rehab and everything, your whole life is in and out of rehab. You can't stop using drugs, in and out of rehab, it never stops. The cycle is destructive. And you still in the same shoe. We're all in the same shoes. We probably have more time behind us than ahead of us. So we have to get busy living. One thing my dad told me before my dad died, and a lot of my friends and a lot of people who know me know that I am not the fastest person at getting things done. I tend to drag my feet and take my time, which has been a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. I like to take my time because I like to smell the roses. I like to take the moment to breathe in the air, to take in the scenery. But sometimes you just got to get stuff done, right? And we're at that point where, and I'm at that point where I got to get stuff done. And that's why I jumped hard into this YouTube channel, the Pen and The Shank, because I've been talking about making a YouTube channel since I found out YouTube was a thing when I first got out of prison, 20 years ago, when me and my wife were living in Slidell, which is the north shore of New Orleans. And I remember talking about it, but, the technology always scared me. And I did a lot of things that I said I wanted to do. But now I'm at that point to where, like, it's got to happen. There are certain things that have to happen, I was digging through my pictures and looking back, and, there's a lot of stuff I did accomplish. I'm going to share this picture with y'all right here. That is a picture of me lifting my hands in Israel. One of the dreams I always had was I wanted to go to Israel, and I wanted to see the place where the Bible actually was. I wanted the Bible to come to life to me. I wanted to go to Israel. I wanted to experience the places that the people in the Bible experienced. I wanted to see the places that Jesus walked. And I got to do that. That's me at the Wailing Wall. I did not know. I was just lifting my hands up, praising God. I didn't know that someone took a picture of me, but that is me lifting my hands and having a moment away from everything else, away from the people I was with, that I just had a moment. And I was just remembering and reflecting. I'm telling y'all, I was thinking back to prison too. In this picture, I said, I made it. I wanted to make it here, and I made it. And it was one of those moments where I said, I accomplished it. I'm grateful. I'm thankful. So when we reach those milestones in life, take a moment and just recollect on where you were when you were thinking about this moment. And just wanted to give a shout out to my dad, man. I miss him and I love him. Here's a picture of me and him when we were kids. And during this picture, man, I'm sure he had a lot of hopes and aspirations. My dad was a party animal, y'all. He partied, and he partied hard, him and my mom, early on in their lives. And my brother was a party animal too. I didn't have a whole, I partied, but you got to think, I went to prison in my teens, and most of my 20s was spent in prison. So when I got out, I did a small bit of this and that, but I never, I never really got to hit the party hard type thing. I hit parties hard on coffee, drinking coffee, hanging out with my ministry friends, and we're going to do witnessing in the middle of the night. We used to go in the hood, do witnessing. We used to go in the Ninth Ward, walk up and down the Ninth Ward. We used to go into the hoods, and we would witness at nighttime. Ain't the smartest thing to do, but we did that, but we drink our coffee and we'd have fun. Sometimes we'd play video games, watch soccer, because some of the soccer games I had, my friends were into soccer, and one of my friends was from Guatemala. And so we used to watch the soccer games late at night and have drink coffee all night. And our wives would hang out too. And there was some good times too, And then, I don't know. I'm looking here. I'm wondering what it's going to be. What's the future of the Pen and the Shank? I want to see the Pen and the Shank grow. I want to be honest with the community. I would like to see the Pen and the Shank become a brand to where we can, it's recognizable, and, you can see it. People will be able to see it for what it's worth, the entertainment aspect, the educational aspect, and the inspirational aspect that I would like to bring to the crime and prison genre, and do it the right way. If you've been watching me long enough, bragging, I don't really care. I don't have to prove anything to anybody, and I know sometimes you see it in a lot of the videos. I'd like to prove to you, if I'm going to prove anything, I want to prove to you that you can look and say, all right, this dude ain't lying. He walked through some fire. He walked through some difficulties, and he's on the better side of life. I can trust him. You know what I mean? This guy's not lying. He knows how to stay solid. He knows how to keep a job. He knows how to stay strong even when he can't keep a job, and stay positive. He knows how to persevere through the difficulties. And when he goes in the valley, he doesn't give up. He stays strong. My commitment to what I'm doing matters, and my commitment to my marriage matters. If you know anything, marriage isn't an easy thing. But I'm married 20 years and I love my wife. I'm blessed. I have a good wife. I'd be a fool, not to be married to my beautiful, lovely, smart, intelligent, God-fearing woman that God gave me. And I wish that for everybody, but you got to learn to walk through some stuff. You can't bail out in the valleys. You see people all the time, and you can't live a perpetual life of complaining. Too many people complain. I hear it on the channel. If all somebody does is complain about how bad the man got them down bad or the government's the problem. And listen, that's not saying that none of these things in themselves. Yes, there are crooked police. Yes, there are crooked politicians. But we have to understand that there are some things in our external circumstances that we can't control. You can't change laws in Congress. You can vote for people who can. And even then, you might not get the results you want. You could write a letter or try to get people to sign a petition that you want a law passed, but that ain't guaranteed neither. Now, if you got enough money, maybe you could buy somebody off, but do you want to live a life where you're buying people off? You want to know for me, it matters, y'all, to know that I was good. I did good, right? In other words, I don't want to be no piece of crap. I don't want to be no con artist, no scam artist, no schemer. I want to be a solid stand-up guy. I want to approach things with dignity, and I want to treat people with dignity. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes in my comments, I got somebody actually had the audacity in one of my comments recently say, "Oh, you've never been to prison." Yeah, okay, man. And my response to that is, if I never been to prison and I spent 2 years on YouTube with a crime and prison channel telling y'all about all the stuff that I went through in prison, what a waste of time, right? I would be one of the biggest dummies that there is to actually sit here and pretend for 2 years that I've been to prison. Like, my big aspiration is to prove to people I'm a tough guy who's in prison and been to prison, but I've never been to prison. That's stupid. You got to grab your mind for a second before you write dumb stuff. So obviously I wrote him something stupid, like I just said, because he gave me a stupid answer. Just dumb. And then I get other people who say stuff. Rule number 1, don't go to prison. Rule number 1. All right, genius. We got that. See, us who went to prison, we already bypassed rule number 1. See, we skipped it. We were stupid, okay? We'll take that. We're stupid. We went to prison. Now that we went to prison, we're talking about the life lessons we learned. And I'm going to tell you something, rule number 1s, who don't go to prison number 1. Oh, rule number 1, duh, stupid guys. Y'all think you're so smart. Bunch of punks. They're all punks playing with each other's buttholes. Let me tell you something. Hear me out. That's all the type of comments I get. Going to prison made me into the man that I am today. I would have preferred not to go to prison. But when I went to prison, I looked in the mirror and I got my life in order. I stood on my own 2 feet. I did my time. And that's another thing. That's why I don't think it's so important to prove to anybody anything about my time. I did my time. People in Louisiana who done time with me in Hunt, DCI, WCI, Fort Wade, Allen, people who done time with me in the satellite camps, West Carroll, East Carroll, Rayville, probably the scariest prison I've ever been through out of all the ones I mentioned. I still ain't told y'all that story yet. People who done time with me, they know I ain't got to hang my head nowhere when I go out in public. I don't have to hide nowhere. I did my time on my own 2 feet. I won my fights and I lost my fights. I probably lost way more fights than I won, but I fought and I didn't back down. And I wasn't the baddest person. I had to tuck my tail a couple times. It happens. But I don't hide. And I don't have to prove anything to anybody. They start talking about that paperwork stuff. Man, you get out of my face with some paperwork. Man, I'll show you a damn thing. You know what I mean? I don't have to show anybody a damn thing. Now, if I decide to show something because it's going to, carry the story along or the arc or something I'm trying to teach or say, then yeah, we can talk about it. But when somebody comes in the comments telling me what I better do, I need to prove. Or another thing I get, y'all, is that this dude's a clown because I don't come at the prison and crime genre like a lot of channels. A lot of channels, they want to tell you all the gangs they were in, the hardest person they know, the biggest fights. Every single day in prison was a fight. It's not what I experienced. And I did time in Louisiana, man, in some really rough places. There were days when people did not fight. Every day in prison is not a fight. Sometimes it's monotonous and you're locked in your cell and everybody's locked in their cell and they're bored out their minds. And sometimes fights kick off, you know what I mean? And all places are different. You got to think the South is much different than the West Coast. The West Coast has structure. The South ain't got no structure. You could do what you want down here in the South, man. Blacks and whites could be best friends in the South. Blacks can also abuse whites as victims, wanting to make whites their punks, You've seen that a lot, So you got to be careful on who you trust, and you got to be solid. Stand on your own 2 feet, man. But my mom and my dad taught me a lot of things, man. And being able to look at my dad and say, man, damn, Dad, you've done a lot of good for me, bro. Because he did a lot of good for me. And my mom, that woman did a lot of good for me. She loved me. She stuck with me. My dad really didn't visit me in prison. He didn't want to see me up there. He might have visited me once or twice, tops, out of all the years I've done in prison, that he actually came and saw me. My mom, she was there. There was about a 2-year period where I told my mother, don't come see me. And I shut everybody off. And that was kind of that time where I began to soul search and change who I was on a mental level and an emotional and spiritual level, to where I matured up in those 2 years, where I kind of pushed the free world. I said, I'm in here. Before I get out of this place, I better make sure I got it together, because I can wind up back in here. It's easy to wind up back, and it's so much easy. It took me 20 years to build up what I have built up now. 20 years of no arrest, 20 years of helping the community, 20 years of being married, 20 years of trying to have a better relationship with my kids, 20 years of staying silent to people and keeping it silent. Now people looking at me and say, dang, I really hated on that dude. I thought Milk would have been in prison a long time ago. I thought he would have been dead a long time ago. Now I'm still here. And I'm actually living my best life when it comes to the fact that I stand up for, I have morals in life. I have a moral compass that guides me, right? There are things that I'm not going to do. I'm not going to steal from Walmart if nobody's looking. I'm not going to steal from you if nobody's looking. I don't steal. I don't hurt innocent people. I help the elderly. I help children. You know what I mean? But let me tell you this too. I support the police. If I see criminals doing crime, you know what I mean? And they're hurting somebody, well, I'm going to call the cops and hope the cops arrest them. Now, if I know you and you're using recreational drugs and that's just what you want to do, well, that's on you. I don't have no problem with that. I ain't stupid. Even cops use drugs, so, but I don't think you should be using drugs and driving. I'm going to advise against that. I tell people who drink and drive all the time, don't do it. Call an Uber, stay home and drink. You don't want to hurt an innocent person, because you're going to have that on your conscience. Like my dad said, some things you can't change. I know people in prison who I did time with, who I met up with in society, and they went on to do some terrible things, and they deserve to be in prison for the rest of their lives. Stuff that I don't even want to talk about. I know one dude, man, he did terrible things, and he's back in prison for the rest of his life, and I avoided him. He finally got in touch with me, but and he's got, these illusions in his mind that he's going to get out, but the state ain't going to let him out. He had his chance. He messed it up. Yo, we just got to learn to do what's right and do the right thing. I'm telling you, we got, think about what you want to do in your life and start doing it, start implementing it. And listen, just because somebody has 1 million followers or, 5 million followers or groupies or whatever on Instagram and TikTok and all that, that don't mean that person's influence is substantial or it's sustainable or it's something that you should even let into your life. You need to pick and choose who you let speak into your life. Know that the person is solid, man. You gotta look at a person's character. Character matters. My character that I have, that I developed over all these years, is important to me. It's important, man. I kept a solid character. I could look a lawman in the face and I ain't got nothing to hide. I can tell him what I did, and I'm not going to let him hold that over my head neither, or beat me up about it. I'll look him in his face and tell him, look here, you ain't finna do that to me. I pay my taxes. I help my community. I know what I did in the past, and I'm telling you one time and one time only. Don't throw that in my face, or we going to have a problem. You know what I mean? I don't have a problem with speaking up. I can speak up for righteousness. And I do many a times. I can speak up if what I'm speaking up is not popular. That happens all the time. But in the Pen and The Shank, my catchphrase is the Pen and The Shank is the most unusual and unique crime and prison channel experience on YouTube. I chose unusual and unique because throughout my life, I've been a little bit different. If you look at the only prison picture that I posted so far on my channel, when I'm with two of my friends who I grew up on the street, they both are kind of looking cool. I'm in the one in the middle. And you see me smiling in prison. And I remember one of my friends who was in that picture with me, he said, man, we always trying to take pictures, man, to look hard. And there you go smiling in jail when we're trying to look hard. I felt like smiling, man. What you want me to do? I got to be happy about something. See, I'm going somewhere. This ain't my end result. I'm going to make something of myself, man. I'm building in this prison. I'm building my mental capacity, my knowledge base. See, I read books when I was in prison, and I didn't read no trash can books, you know. Some dudes, all they read is Playboys. Not me. You know, I read the classics, man, specifically, and I read autobiographies. You know, and I'll tell y'all some of my favorite books that I read that I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed reading Charles Dickens, Herman Melville. I enjoyed reading H.G. Wells, you know, and George Orwell, Aldous Huxley, you know, Brave New World Revisited, 1984, Animal Farm. I enjoyed reading these books. Milton William Cooper, which we talked about on my channel. You know, some people say he's conspiracy theorist, but if you read his stuff, man, the dude's real solid, you know. Behold the Pale Horse, the Holy Bible, you know, the type of stuff that I read that would make myself better, you know, to teach myself. I studied the dictionary. I played Scrabble and taught myself how to spell better, you know. You can teach yourself numbers when you're playing cards because numbers are needed to balance your checkbook and make sure your taxes on the up and up. Find a way to be positive. But if all you're reading is stuff that's not going to make you better, and you get out of prison and you repeat the revolving door and the revolving cycle, you know. And so I've talked long enough, y'all. I just wanted to go on a rant, and it all started because I remember what my father said to me. And he said, son, some things you won't be able to change. And he told me, he said, don't take another man's life if you don't have to. Dad, I know you're not here, but thank you for that solid and wise advice. And I'm sharing it with my community on the Pen and the Shank, Dad. And I know that there's somebody who's going to hear it and they're going to take heed and understand. And your words, Dad, are going to touch somebody. That's my hope.